myself out.
I am afraid of...
I'm terrified and paralyzed by...
I am deathly afraid of...
Welcome to the Sum of All Fears podcast with your host, me, Ryan Perrio. Hello and welcome to the Sum of All Fears podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Perrio. This week, my guest is Michelle Neat. Michelle is an athletic trainer who now lives in New York. She lived here in Dallas for a short time. She did some comedy. We became friends over our love for Houston sports, since we both have Houston roots. We had a great conversation, so let's get into our conversation about life in New York, physical fitness, and the tragic loss of her brother, which is the trigger of one of her biggest fears, watching a loved one struggle with grief and feel helpless. It's a very powerful episode. There was a lot of emotion, but I felt like it was a really good conversation. So let's get into it with my friend Michelle Neat. We're here with my friend and soon-to-be sports athletic trainer, Michelle Neat. Also, Michelle Neat is one of the, MLB fan ambassadors, I believe is what they're called.
So, just to briefly talk about them, the fans. So, a man named Steven Leonardi, he is based up in Pennsylvania. He started the Fan Association probably 3 months ago. And I was listening to a Locked On Astros podcast. It was a baseball podcast. And I reached out to him via Twitter. And I said, I think what you're doing is fantastic, because he created it with the intention of giving the fans a voice. So creating a governing body, like when I say giving the fans a voice, like creating a governing body who could tell the MLB, figure out a way to do, make the game an affordable experience, because the MLB is pricing they're pricing people out of fandom. Yeah. Like a family of four, it costs over $200 with drinks or refreshments and parking and tickets. It'll cost you about $200 or a little bit more, because everything about being a fan, almost everything about being a fan is expensive.
You don't have to tell me that with how much apparel and things I have that
I feel your pain.
Even I usually go in clearance. I will usually, when I go visit my dad in Houston, full disclosure, I'm an Astros fan, and when I go visit my dad in Houston, there's an academy on the way to his house. If I go down, it's off of 290, and it's right there. I will cut into that academy, and I'll go see what's on clearance. So,
because I don't want to rule the conversation, make it centered on baseball, so we can.
Too late.
Subject change.
You used to live here in Dallas and you moved to New York. So what did you originally move to New York for physical training? Is that something you were just starting to get into down here, or did you kind of discover that living in New York and needing something else to do?
Well, so glad you asked that question. There's a lengthy answer. Yes and no. But so I really, because a lot of what I was doing in Texas before I moved out to New York was I did a lot of modeling, a lot of print, some runway work, some acting work, and a lot of being employable, or just being a desirable candidate for jobs, meaning you have to take care of yourself. So I really pretty much my whole life, somewhat of a healthy-ish lifestyle was encouraged, but it really got intense and focused right around 2014. I moved up to New York because I had been seeing someone. They had lived in New York. We met in 2011, but they were living in New York. So he and I were seriously involved to the point where we did, we were going to get married. It did not pan out. About a week after I moved, he decided, he was like, hey, so, my ex-girlfriend, still in love with her. I don't know that this is going to work out. I was like, so yeah, it was 2016 was arguably one of the most, not the most emotionally painful year, but one of the most. So it really gave me a chance to focus on getting really into, physical fitness, getting myself into the best shape of my life. And people kept asking me like, oh, what are you doing? What are your workouts? And I was like, oh yeah, you can. And like, I discovered that you can make money off of this. And a lot of the research, so it really, everything really originated in 2016 from that one event, from that move to New York. And it's just really, I mean, living in a city where you don't know a lot of people, it gives you so much time to work on yourself. So
absolutely. And you had such motivation because, the reason you moved up there was just, I guess, ripped from you. So really, you had to do something to not just sit there and think about it. If you didn't, all you'd have to do was sit in your apartment and maybe go to work, maybe not.
Maybe hate yourself. A lot of self-loathing.
Yeah, well, that's the worst thing when you feel down or for some reason anything as far as any kind of inadequacy is to be stuck. Like, this has been hell for me. Literally, with no comedy, no routine. I've been in this apartment so much. And when you're just alone with your thoughts, it's like, that's the worst thing you can put me with.
Boy, howdy, do I know it.
And so, this used to be just where I wouldn't think about any of that stuff. This would be where maybe I wrote some jokes, but mostly it was me winding down, eating some food and going to bed. I've spent very little time in this apartment, even though I've lived at this same apartment for 10 years. And so I totally get that what can I do to develop a new routine that can keep me from thinking about my old one. Right.
And in addition to getting heavily involved in fitness, there's a film school up here. It's a small vocational film school that I got a little bit of I got scholarship money to attend, and it was like a 1-year program. And that's not even, my education was already in progress. And so this film school, this 1-year hiatus, had zero to do with the long-term goal, but it ended up being super useful. So that was another super constructive thing I did with my time. Basically, you reach a point where something traumatic happens and you you either let it drive you insane and eat you up, or you're like, something's got to change. Either I go mad or I change something. I do something different. And that was a point that I reached. And I've reached that point a few more times along the way.
Is it like Sex and the City in New York?
No, it is far more low budget than that. The TV show like Sex and the City and the TV show Girls, highly unrealistic. I want to create a different show where it really depicts what it's like dating, because there's not as much money involved. Guys do not take you out to expensive dinners and stuff. A lot of the times they'll just try to be like, hey, especially now with everything shut down, why don't we just keep it low key and go back to my place? There's none of that. It's a lot of lazy maneuvers. There's just not unrealistic financial picture painted by Hollywood.
Well, New York is an unrealistic financial picture for most people. People move there and have no idea how much it costs to live until you're in it. And that's one thing. When I was younger than you, when I was in my early 20s, me and my best friend were like, yeah, we're going to move to New York. We're going to live life. We're going to party in New York. And I'm in my 20s. I'm an engineer at the phone company, so I'm okay. And so I go on this job site, I'm looking at jobs in New York, okay, what would I theoretically be able to do? And on monster.com, bless their hearts, they had a city calculator for how much money what kind of income you would need to have in one city to live in the other. So I would put, from Dallas-Fort Worth, my salary is this. How much would I need to make to do that in New York? And it was like, you make $38,000, you will need to make $64,000 in New York City to have the same lifestyle that you enjoy here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I was like, well, that's probably not going to be something I can easily just attain. It was an eye-opening thing, and I'm like, oh. And then I started looking at San Francisco and things like that and how much it costs to live in other areas, and it's like, well, you can see why people move to Dallas-Fort Worth or to Texas in general.
I mean, I don't make $64,000. I make below that. But I mean, I live in a studio apartment and I live alone, which is almost as you get older, you see more, like you run into more people that do not have roommates in New York. But in New York, it is people almost always have roommates. I pay $1,150 for a studio apartment, and it's not even in Manhattan. It's in Brooklyn. It's in Crown Heights. Crown Heights is kind of dangerous. Not as much as it used to be. It is gentrification has definitely put in work in the area. But I mean, the apartment I lived in before this was in a very dicey area. So they have this, it's the West Indian Day Parade always occurs around Labor Day, and it's called Juve. And some of the West Indian nations don't quite see eye to eye. So there's a lot of violence. And without fail, there are 2 or 3 murders a year at minimum related to incidents related to Juve. So the first year I was in my old apartment was a double homicide. The next year, as I was getting ready to move into the apartment I'm in now, was a triple homicide. Not trying to brag, but I've been around a lot of murder.
Well, I'm glad it wasn't anything affiliated too much with you, like you were just a bystander or passerby.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could maybe change in people's minds, and I don't know what comedy is like up there at this point either.
I stopped doing it for a lot of reasons. Like it's really, really hard because I tried the first time I got on stage, I did it like I went up 2 or 3 times, maybe 4 times at an open mic in New York before moving back to Texas. And then I really did comedy. I really gave comedy a go in Texas. I stopped when I attempted to, and I did for like the first year I was here, sort of did comedy, but I mean, priorities shifted. It's a complete bloodbath. Like it's so concentrated. So many people are trying to do it. And I mean, which is great because there are more opportunities for stage time, but it's also extremely, it's a huge market.
It's hard to stand out in a lineup of 3,000. It's hard enough to stand out in a lineup of 300, let alone like 3,000. And, like then there's the buddy system of, this guy works with so-and-so, and so he gets a little bit of a nod versus maybe someone who's maybe slightly better, but because he doesn't have those affiliations, may not get the same kind of nod that the one that does. And I don't hate that. I mean, that's part of it's part of the game. It's, a lot of it is timing. You've got to be in front of the right people at the right time, doing the right things, and good on those people for doing that. Comedy's not fair. It's not the guy that's been doing it the longest the right way that gets the most success.
It does take a toll on your mental health, and to give myself a fair chance at being creating like a healthy headspace and trying to make progress. And because I mean, I was 26 at the time, and I wanted to make serious progress towards that. I got that like existential dread about turning 30. So I knew that basically it came down to, this is like the most vain and simple way I explain it to people. I just enjoy having a 6-pack more than I do going up on stage each night. Like my priorities are shifted.
Yes.
Completely different. And especially with like everything that's happened so far, even with this year, comedy is the last, like doing comedy. I enjoy consuming it, and I really appreciate and want to support my friends who do it. But for me, it's probably not it in the long run. That's not what I was meant to do. Fair
enough. And I'd never encourage anybody to not do it, or to, if they are doing it, to, stop doing it. I'm always like, you'll figure out what you need doing it. I was like, life will dictate what your intentions are. At some point, either something else comes up in life, or you meet somebody and they take more of your time. Just life, I always say life comes first. At some point, comedy will always be there if you want to do it and want to come back to it. There's always an open mic somewhere. But you can't be like, this girl may be the love of my life, but, I can't see her in this open mic.
Right. And it's about like lifestyle. Like I really had to, I just chose to invest time in my physical and mental health. Like I moved, like shortly after moving to New York, I started going to a therapist regularly. So because I see a therapist once a week, and I have no problem admitting, because like I'm very open about like what I deal with, anxiety and depression. I take Wellbutrin. So it's a low level SSRI. It's selective serotonin something. Listen, I struggle with ADHD. I'm prescribe Adderall for that. I don't take Adderall as frequently as I'm prescribed it because Adderall is very intense.
Okay.
But I made those a priority. So I prioritized that and making serious progress towards the overall goal, which was to work in the MLB, because it marries all of my favorite things, which are helping others and, physical personal training. So physical fitness, nutrition, baseball, kind of like binded all those together. And I made the decision when I was younger, I said, I want to play baseball. I want to be a baseball coach. And so I guess it hasn't really changed since I was younger. But I mean, that's serious. It's not, for me, it's not a matter of will it happen. It's a matter of when it will happen.
Okay. Well, I applaud you for going at it and for keeping, sustaining your, I guess, focus on doing that and not letting anything else distract you from the goal. Instead of like a relationship or something like that may try to steer you away, that you say that even if you did meet somebody, let's say, and it was gravitating towards a more serious side, I feel like at this point in your life, you're like, look, I'm going for this kind of career. Either we're going to be aligned in this, or we're going to have to. It's not, I'll enjoy your company, but I don't know how far this can go.
And I think I like to be very direct a lot of the time because I feel like it's a very efficient way of operating. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and I understand everyone's comfort level and style of communication varies from individual to individual. So with some guys, it's made it uncomfortable because I'm towards the beginning, within like the first couple months, I let them know that I'm not going to invest time in something that if you don't see yourself, if it's not like a similar energy or similar, I'm not saying necessarily baseball, but if your mindset isn't towards similar to what I'm trying to do, I don't think it's going to work out in the long run. So I try to be as fair as possible, and I try to cut like that person loose if it's not. And if I do see potential, then I try to invest more time, because it's like in therapy, they talk about a cost benefit analysis. Mm-hmm. What is this costing you? What is this benefiting you?
Yes.
And if it's a terribly imbalanced equation that's not going to benefit you in the long run or serve you in the long run.
Yeah, but I was going to say either way too, is if he's sacrificing everything and you're benefiting everything, eventually it's going to crash too, because he's going to resent, and it'll come from his side rather than the cost on your side of making sacrifices. You'll bear the brunt of him making all these sacrifices for you. And so I get what you're saying with the equation. It doesn't just mean your side has to benefit. It has to be a mutual benefit. If it's all cost on his side, we're in the same boat, just on the opposite end of it.
He's a very controversial figure for good reason. I don't agree with everything this person says, but regardless of where you stand on him, like personally, Jordan B. Peterson is a very smart person. Some of his views are I don't agree with them, but he talked about this very thing, because most of the time, if it's somebody like that, I try to give them a chance or read up on them. And so I read one of his books, and he said something that stood out, that in an imbalanced relationship like that, it will breed resentment, and it creates this very unhealthy dynamic. And it's just ultimately not going to, so you have to recognize, you have to really be honest with yourself. One of the first things he talks about in his book, 12 Rules for Life, is stand up straight with your shoulders back, which he is signifying that you have to take personal responsibility for yourself, the direction of your life. And he quantifies that idea in very simple ways, clean your room. I mean, if you can't manage your own household, how is somebody supposed to entrust you with larger things beyond your own room, beyond your own home front? So I think you're exactly right when you say if it's always give, and never, if there's not a balance, I mean, you can try to make it work in the long run, and maybe that the couple stays together, but it's not going to be healthy. And I think that my biggest goal right now is to number one, be as healthy as possible, because the better relationship you have with yourself, the easier it is to facilitate a connection with somebody else that's viable in the long run.
So my podcast is about fears, and some fears are like phobias, where a constant, like, how do you manage this phobia? Like, if you're put in a situation. And then there are people that have, like, worries and existential dread, like these overarching fears that don't hit you every day, but are in the back of your mind that every once in a while where you're just laying there in bed about to go to sleep, hey, what if this happened? And then you just sit there and you're up, for an hour just trying to not think about it. And that's where your fear kind of comes in. So what is your fear, Michelle Neat?
Well, first of all, there's a little noise that you keep hearing in the background, and I've got one of those automatic Glade air freshener things that, like, does this spritz thing every however many minutes. So that's what that is. My apartment smells fantastic, though, so I regret nothing.
Okay.
But one of my biggest fears, and you and I had discussed this previously, and I mean, it's, for those who have known me and know what has transpired recently, one of my biggest fears came true this year, where I lost my younger brother. And one of my biggest fears is that happening and me being there and me having to witness how much pain it would cause my mom. Like, that happened. So he was living in Chicago at the time, and he was with his best friends when he passed. So I'm trying to kind of really gather the positive shreds of the situation. He was surrounded by his best friends. There's some positive things that have transpired out of it, but I have had to take on a lot of responsibility concerning this. So I had to go up to Chicago. I flew up to Chicago. I met my mom. And when, you have to transport human remains across state lines, there's certain processes you have to go through. So you have to designate a funeral home in the home state, because they have to set up, they have to be the person to receive the body at the airport from the airline. And they have to arrange for the body to be prepared to be shipped from a location out of state that they pre-arranged. So my biggest fear was, and it came true. I think it was May 23rd or 24th it happened. I went with my mom to the mortuary, and I'm super sorry if I get a little emotional. It is very fresh.
You have nothing to apologize for. The loss of a loved one's never something that you should be able to, that you should hold back any emotion on.
All right.
Yeah. Because seriously, that's something that you have to get out at some point. You can't hold that stuff in.
Yeah. I mean, so May 23rd, I had to go with my mom to the mortuary, and she was a mess. She was super happy that I was there. I mean, because my sister is pregnant, and so she hasn't been able to do anything. And my youngest brother, Jacob, he just got married. He's out of college. There's not a lot that he can. Yes, he is supportive of, and he loves my mom, and he will do what he can for the family. But I was the person most primed to be the most useful in this situation. So I went with her, and, they wait. And a few days earlier, we had dropped off clothes. And so they set the body in a room. So this is how it happened. And they opened up the doors, and my mom kind of just let out this scream, and her knees buckled.
Yeah.
And we walked into the room. And I know that this is going to be shitty, but nothing, and the thing is, you can know something like this is coming, but nothing can prepare you for the feeling of when it actually happens. And my biggest fear was having him, because my brother had, in the past, some struggles with drugs. And what he passed away from was unrelated, by the way. It was a myocardial infarction, which is the same thing Regis Philbin died from, which is a fancy way of saying a heart attack. But it wasn't caused by drugs, so that's a small victory. Anyway,
I knew he was in rehab. I know you had said something like he was getting better, and
he had moved on.
I thought you said he had moved to Chicago when he did move or something like that. That he was kind of getting away from that.
I mean, he had been away from it, so he pretty much anything that he seriously hard drug wise, the last year that he probably struggled with that was 2000, when he got out of prison, which is at the beginning of 2015. So for 5 years, 5 years removed from all of the drama, he was doing super great for himself. But so back to the day in question before I, completely go off track. So one of my biggest fears was seeing my mom or an immediate family member pass away and having to be there in the room and just being completely powerless. And that happened. Like it's like there was a very like physical, visceral reaction to seeing him there. And then like she like laid across his body, not like laid across his body. She pushed over his body and like cupped his face. And, how could this happen? Yeah. She was crying, and that's the most intense cry and most painful sound. It's something that I've struggled with, and it has caused I have nightmares about it still, to the point where I had to go. I've had to go on short-term leave from my job because it's affected my day. People can tell you what happens when you lose an immediate family member, especially a younger brother my family is pretty tight knit. It's just really hard because we had all of these plans. We talked about opening up a restaurant together later on down the road. The last time that I saw him, the last thing that we did as a family was we all dressed up and we went and saw the last Star Wars movie. And we flew out the same day. So the last time I saw him, I gave him a hug and he was half asleep. And my mom at the beginning of quarantine asked me to fly down, and I couldn't because there was stuff I had to take care of in the city for my job. Because there was nobody else really at the company that could do what needed to be done. And so I never got to see him before he passed. And I guess one of my biggest fears is maybe I wasn't there for him enough, or I failed him, or something. There was a shortcoming of mine that led to his demise. And I know that's not true, but it's impossible to think about the what ifs or the shoulds in that situation. And there's just a lot, seeing my mom in pain. She's had a lot of health struggles. Yeah. She's still recovering from COVID when this happened. So her lungs were damaged. It was just really hard for her. So to hear her say, my son, how could this happen? And cup his face and then scream because he was so cold, and then turn to me saying please, I just want him to come back. I hope why won't he come back? And just the whole situation is so fucking awful. I don't care. To anybody that I know, I don't care if we're on good terms or not, or you hate me or you don't hate me. I don't wish this upon anybody, because it's a really hard feeling to deal with. Having this, it's just a waking nightmare for the past, almost 4 months now, because you love somebody so much and so intensely, and you don't expect it. You don't expect to bury your younger sibling, and you certainly don't expect to have to see your parents go through the pain of a parent's worst nightmare is burying a child.
Yes, I know that's hard.
Yeah.
You also need to give yourself credit for the fact that you were that rock for your mom. And so I know there's a what if factor.
Yeah.
But there was factor, which was you were there. You did drop everything, and you were there, a shoulder for your mom to cry on, someone that could be there. And I don't know how much it hurts, but I know how that what if feeling, because when I lost my grandfather, I was literally 2 months from being able to go into the ICU and see him. So I was too young to be admitted, and so I could only write him letters when he was coherent. So I only got to see the slow digression of where he went. And so there's always the what ifs. There was a resentment towards the hospital that I had for a while for not bending the rules for somebody. It was 15 years and a month away from their 16th birthday. It was in November, December, and my birthday was in January 3rd. And so there's a little bit of resentment saying, why couldn't you just bend the rules just this one time? At some points, there's always going to be those what ifs, but I don't think there's anything that you should really be upset, ashamed for, I would say, as far as I feel like you did the best you could. There's never a time where I feel like he called you and either one, you pressed decline the call, or, he constantly reached out and you just didn't. You're super tight knit. Are you the oldest?
No, I am. So there's 4 of us. So Andrea, who is the oldest, and then there is me, who's the second oldest, and there was Noah, and then there was Jacob. So, Noah Noah and I had a pretty close bond because we were like the middle children. Both
Mm-hmm.
of our other siblings were in serious relationships. Like my sister married 3 kids with a fourth on the way. So we were kind of like the free spirit. Like we had just like all of these plans.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said, you really screwed me, buddy, because now the pressure is on. Everyone's like, well, Michelle, you're the only one not married or seriously involved. What's your plan? When are you going to give me grandchildren? I'm like, listen, I'm working on it.
Mm-hmm. But and you're really close. You've talked about your mom at length when I did know you a bunch of times. So, and I believe you're named after her, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. So my full name is Lisa Michelle Neat. So Lisa is my mom's first name, and Michelle was she told me the story. She said, Michelle was my favorite like girl's name, and she's like, I was obsessed with that name, and it sounded really good with Lisa, so we named you Michelle. So I am named after her. She and I are very close. We're even closer now, and we talk frequently. I try to talk to her daily, even if it's because this is very, very hard for her.
Absolutely.
And so I may try to call her and it's not even for any specific reason. I try to call her at least once a day, just sometimes in the morning, just to say, good morning, Mom. I hope you have a good day. Because I know that she knows that I am here for her, like unwaveringly, like support. And people have pointed out, well, you always have a decision, how to handle yourself in that situation. But that thought has never crossed my mind, because if the situation, yes, I had a choice to not go up to Chicago. Yes, I had a choice to not do a lot of things, but there was a need. And if it's in a situation with somebody that I care about, or maybe not even somebody that I am very emotionally attached to, if there is a need and I'm put in that situation or put in a position to be that person to help, I am that person to help without question. It's like you remove yourself, your personal feelings from the situation, and you only look at it in like a pragmatic sense. Like there's a function that needs to be like served. And so you serve that function.
So I'll tell you a story. So my parents divorced when I was 3. Somehow they had still a close enough relationship where they were able to be friends and be in the same room with each other. And when my dad's grandmother was the first one to pass, my mother on my grandmother's side, God rest her soul, lasted until 2015. And so in 2004, my first experience really with death that I would say old enough for and kind of aware to, because my grandfather's passing, he didn't want a funeral. We basically almost felt like we overnighted his remains into the mausoleum. Like they called us at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I heard my grandmother wailing, and that was, the most part. And so one day I call and they're like, come on. It's happening. You need to come down here. And I got pulled over and I got delayed and it didn't get there in time. By the time I got there, she was already gone. So I had to process this. I'm grieving the whole way down at this point. I was just exhausted. And my dad looked to his husband and he said, I'm glad that Ryan wasn't here to see this, because it's just a really rough thing to watch somebody pass. And I did feel slightly guilty because I couldn't get there in time to say goodbye, but I knew my intentions, and I knew the realistics of driving from Dallas to Beaumont, Texas, and getting there before that happened. Now here's because of my relationship with my mom and my dad, the way they were able to do that. So the day of the funeral, everyone from our my dad's side of the family is going to the funeral. Unbeknownst to me or a couple others, my mom drives in while I'm being a pallbearer, living one of my worst nightmares of being a pallbearer at my grandmother's funeral, because I don't know anything. They don't teach you anything about coffins. There's no fitness. There's nothing.
Yeah.
And so I come back from all of that, and I come into the house, and my mom has got all the food for everybody pretty much ready to go for all the people from the funeral. And so for her to do that, it was amazing. And it's something, my dad never forgot. And so when my grandmother passed on my mom's side, they made it a point to go visit my mom in Houston when they were putting my grandmother's remains on my mom's side next to my grandfather. It's one of those things where when my grandmother, my mom's side, passed, I kind of did the same thing my mom did for my dad's side, which was everybody in my mom's side of the family, it's a smaller family, but we're close-knit. They're all trying to process this grief. So I stopped in, got a rotisserie chicken, got food and everything. And I just brought dinner and cried a little off and on. But for the most part, I was kind of just there and present just to let them know I'm here if you need me. And I just was there to kind of provide relief that, yes, I'm here. There are still people here, that you're not just losing, let me show you what you gained. And I feel like that's what you kind of provided for your mom by, yes, was it it's, never a good situation when a parent has to mourn the loss of their child, but to have another child there to kind of, be that stabilizing force, because I couldn't imagine not being there. I couldn't put myself, and you can't either, in that situation. You couldn't imagine not going down to Chicago or to the funeral home with your mom to view your brother, to confirm, I guess, to make sure they got the right shipment, which I think is just, it's the most gut-wrenching, and you dread it the whole way. Deep down, you're hoping maybe this is all a misunderstanding, and it's such a horrible reality.
Why? Because like you can recognize things logically. Like I recognize there's a logic, like not to say that there's like a logical reason why, because it still doesn't make sense. Like he had a heart condition, and he was born with that. I mean, he suffered pancreatitis, he had stomach problems, and there's probably a few other health problems that he were aware of, that it wasn't something that he was letting on to. Like ultimately it was just some health things that he struggled with health-wise that led to his demise physically. So I understand that. To build upon your earlier point about like being supportive, the whole experience, it changes the person, and how it changes the person is different for everyone. But for me, like I know like how intense this all has felt and how appreciative I've been of like kindness from others. So I think that this experience has definitely made me more empathetic, more compassionate, and make me, just because I know how awful I feel and how awful this has felt, and how it's really just negatively impacted my immediate family members and everyone around him, first of all. So it's just made me kinder. But to speak upon that, like my brother was only in Chicago for like a year, maybe. But he was he struggled with a lot personally, but he was a very good person. He was very kind, very charming, would go out of his way for everybody. Hell, the guy was there for a year. And when we packed up his apartment, because I hadn't gotten to visit him before he passed, I packed up his apartment. My mom was like, I want to meet some of his friends. I want to meet everyone he worked with. So when we put on this little like Irish style wake, and we're not Irish, but my brother was very about the Irish culture. We're Irish adjacent, we're Welsh. So when his house, like his apartment, there were so many people there, he was so widely loved. I found out like a few like really, it just made me really proud of the man he became. So because he struggled really badly with drugs earlier on, and so one of his best friends, and it was because he passed away at his friend Dwayne's house, and he was also very good friends with Charlie, and there was a few people there that they all worked together and they were all good friends, but Charlie was the one who got to him first. So his friend Charlie, when he first met Charlie was coming out of a very difficult personal situation, and I don't really want to get into details because it's not really my stuff to spill, but he knew what it was like to struggle with things very intensely. And I'm not saying they struggled in the same nature, but he knew what it was like to struggle with things very intensely. So he made a point to go out of his way. He like pulled Charlie aside and basically gave him no choice. He's like, you're going to come over to my house on like Wednesday nights, and we're going to cook. I'll cook you dinner. We're going to sit down. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to check in with you regularly and make sure, like, help you kind of through this difficult patch. Cause I wish that I had had that when I was going through a similar situation. He was a very good man. And like, he would acted kind of gruff or whatever, but for those who really knew him, he was a very, just biggest sweetheart, especially. And when his friends back in Texas, that was, I mean, his reach was so far spread. He was so like all encompassing. There was so many. I mean, we had to limit the people at the actual funeral, but like the viewing, and it's usually there's like an open-ended time frame, like from this time to this time, and it's usually like 5 hours or whatever. But there were so many people. I mean, it's just so a lot of the positive things that came out. There's some positive things to come out of a horrible situation. So it helped me find a new level of love and appreciation that I didn't. I mean, I loved and appreciated my brother.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's kind of awe-inspiring sometimes to see the impact of a person's life, and just and it really confirms what you believe too, because you, like you said, you knew your brother was a good person, and you're seeing physical proof walk in the door at a viewing over and over and over again, just people just piling in that your brother had impacted in a positive way. It
was amazing. And like I had loved him. I was excited. So when my mom told me when I was little, when I first found out I was going to have a brother, I was so excited when he was born. I was in love. I just loved being around him. And there's this picture of, I think it's my mom holding him, but it's a picture of somebody holding my brother, and my sister has a hold of his hand, and I have this big smile on my face, and I have a hold of his other hand. Well, I had a very small hand, so it's more like I had a hold of his pinky. But I mean, so from the beginning, from the jump, there was just nothing but love. And it was kind of like a very weird full circle moment where I was there when he was born, and when everybody had left the graveside, and there comes the point where there's a ceremony, my dad shoveled the dirt, scooped the dirt in his grave. I was there, I shoveled the dirt into his grave too. I mean, it was from beginning to end. And still after, it's such a complex thing to really internalize and understand that for the rest of your life, there's no, this person is not physically present. I'm not sure. A lot of this makes me question, what is the afterlife? Is there an afterlife? What happens? Because I'm a very small individual in this the vast scheme of the universe. I don't have the answers. I don't know. So there's a lot of questions. If there is an afterlife, I hope I do meet him and I get to be with him again.
I'm sure you will. I totally believe that, that you don't, this is not the end of everything, that there is a better place. And if there's a better place, he's obviously going to be there because he's such a good person. I know it's hard because especially you're just not losing somebody you'll never see again. It's somebody that you want to talk to. Something good happens. It's something you'll want to share with that person. And so, sometimes you just have to, I guess, I don't know if there's a ritual you can come up with to kind of, share that with him. I don't know if it's like talking to a photograph.
So far, yeah, it's been the photograph. It's been for a while, and I still have it. Now it's usually just out loud, or if I think of something, or there's because he was he was obsessed with Star Wars. And I think it was kind of like a family thing where we all were pretty big fans. But anytime I see something like that, I just kind of look up or mention out loud, even if I'm by myself, which I've gotten some very interesting looks if that's the case. I just say something to him. For a while, it was the program from his funeral. So, I would talk, because there's a picture of him on the front, and so I would just talk to him, and I'll just tell him, it's really hard. Sometimes I'll just wake up, and I'll say, buddy, it feels really hard today. I wish you were here. Or I'm going through this. I wish you were here. And I think about just some of the sillier stuff. He and I were obsessed with the movie Biodome. And in the movie, they do that dance it's like Pauly Shore's character and Stephen Baldwin's character do this goofy dance they call it the tribal, where they just like dance around. And so that's something that we would do. And I just like, there's stuff like that I know I'll never get to do. I wrote him a note and I tucked it in the pocket of his coat of the suit that he was buried in. So he was buried with it. It's just really hard. Yeah. To wrap that whole thing up, it's hard.
What if you got a notebook and just titled it Dear, like almost like a Dear Noah, and it just became like a compendium?
Well, I've been, like I said, like I do therapy, and like I started going to like a support to just really, because the biggest thing that I've realized is that I need to make sure that like I put in the work to deal with this in a healthy manner. Well, they talked about writing down in a book, like writing letters to him. And I've done something, and this is unrelated. Like my best friend, he is serving overseas right now. And so instead of sending him letters and mail each time, I have this journal where I've been writing him letters, and he's aware, like my best friend, like he's aware that it exists. So I will, and he knows like because he's actually coming home soon. They have to demobilize. So like they go from where they're at overseas to a station where they demobilize, and then they go home. So that's why some of the service time is padded, like that time window is padded, because to include like the mobilization, the service, demobilization. So like with my friend, he's aware that this happens. I'm going to hand him that journal, all of these letters that I've been writing him. And I started doing the same thing with my brother. And I'm doing that and for my mom, she's asked me to do this because, you know, like I went through that whole film school. And so like I got certified in a few like video editing and audio editing softwares. So I know how to utilize the programs pretty well when I'm able to bring myself to do it and it not like completely destroy me. I'm going to like make her a very like beautiful like compilation video of some stuff of him, like pictures of videos. I've been working on this thing where like, you know how like Kobe wrote his letter, like Dear Basketball, somebody animated that, put his words to animation. So some of the memories that people have shared, I'm doing something similar. Like that'll be in the overall product where what they said is animated, and some of the stuff that Noah has said, some of the audio clips I have of him will be the lyrics. Will like it's like a lyric. You know how like when you have like a music video or a song, some artists put out the lyric video. Essentially, it's going to be that. There's going to be clips of that. So there's just different ways that I've been processing and handling it. So that is to answer your it's a very long-winded way of saying one of my biggest fears is something happening to an immediate family member and me not being there when they pass or not being able to help them if they're super sick.
So now that it's happened once, you're afraid it's going to happen again.
Yes. So the whole city of Chicago, the whole state of Illinois, there's going to be a real long time before I can go back there. There are certain, like my brother, he was younger than me, and so he was more into some of like the newer rappers like Lil Uzi Vert, and I'm not even sure he's a real, like Lil Uzi Vert's like a real person, but I mean, Noah was a fan of him. There are certain songs I can't like watch, certain movies, like foods, just a lot of stuff that I can't do because it's a trigger and it's too painful. And it elicits a very visceral physical response within me. Be it like I get physically ill, I can't sleep. It just depends. And the thing is, I still don't know how this is going to impact me because grief is revealing itself in new and horrifying ways each day.
Unfortunately, it's an unfortunate side effect of losing someone. It's, slowly coming to grips and, refinding yourself in a way that you can still move forward, and you may get to where you can kind of watch those movies and videos at some point. You'll slowly kind of, they won't become triggers for sadness as much as just a way for you to kind of remember the good times. And so they may at some point, instead of being a focus point on the bad side of it, they may trigger the good side of that memory of this was our little dance, the biodome dance or what have you. that it just kind of, you'll focus more on the happy part of the memory of the time that was than it not being that way again. You have to slowly, I guess, flip that coin to that side, and there's no timetable for it. If there's no grace period, there's no deadline. It just sort of happens. And for some people it seems like it's weeks. Other people it could take years. I mean, there's some people it probably I don't think it ever truly goes away. At some point it just you start to long more for the happy memories than you do, oh my god, this is going to make me think about the sad, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I was talking to another friend of mine about it, and they sent me this video clip. And this is, when I mention his name, this is not me talking about anything politically. This is just me talking about this figure as a person. But Joe Biden there's a clip of him talking about grief because he lost, and I didn't know until I watched this video clip that he lost, he was married before the woman he was married to now, he lost his wife and daughter in a car accident. Mm-hmm. And he talks about grief and how I think it was a governor, because he had just become a congressman at the time. So a governor contacted him and said, I can't pretend to know what you are going through. Because the Congress, the other member of the government, I forgot if he was a governor or another congressperson, talked about how there's a calendar, and each day on that calendar you write down a number 1 to 10, and slowly and then after a few months you take that data and put it into a graph, and you'll start to notice that you still have those low days, those days where it's a 10 and it's really bad, but they become further and further and further apart. And so hearing that, something as simple as that, has been kind of helpful, kind of comforting. That's pretty much, that for that fear, that's all I got to say for that part.
Yes, and you just can't predict life. As much as we'd love to be able to know, there's some beauty in the fact that we don't. And there's beauty in the fact that I live my life this way because I know it's not, there's not this going on. I live my life knowing that at some point my luck will run out or something tragic may happen to me. And so I always try to be balanced. I don't try to have a lot of anger or, resentment towards people at some point. And I kind of gotten to a center with that around 2017. I'm like, everybody at some point, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it to worry about. And how I approach relationships is I'm just happy by myself. And if you're with me, all you're doing is adding to the happiness I already have. And so I try to keep that balance of just staying, I would say, happy and content, but also understanding.
Yeah, I think that looking at trying to identify the humanity in every person instead of just, because I said some listen, on Twitter, I have done a lot of my fair share of shit posting, and I've said some pretty awful things to people. But I've tried to do that less and less, because at the end of the day, they are a person. Because regardless of how much I disagree with some media figures or some just people, I try to, if the conversation gets to that point, I try to say, let them know that I may disagree with you on this point, but it's not that it's not a mark against you personally. Yeah. I still think that you are probably a good person. Sometimes I don't know them, so I can't say that for a fact, but I respect their work that they do, especially if it has to relate to anything that is of great interest to myself. And I think bringing humanity to each person, even though dating sucks, makes relationships a little bit harder. And I think that's probably another one of my very big fears, is never dying alone, really, honestly, because everybody immediately involved with the loss of my brother has a significant other or is paired up with somebody very closely. I live in a city where I do have friends and I know people, but I live by myself. So this has felt very lonely. very lonely. So, I mean, that's another one of my really big fears is dying alone and never kind of being able to form a deep emotional relationship with another human.
I think that could still be coming on the horizon. It's just sometimes it's just never the right time, and it's one of those things where once you're in a good place, then you realize that you kind of identify people that are adding to that rather than taking away from that. And so you'll date somebody that maybe he's not all about you, or like, I've got to get your number. Maybe he just is really cool. Like, he ends up liking baseball, but he's a Red Sox fan, and he'll just converse with you. And it starts just as it's a really nice conversation. There's no any talk of dating or anything. He just talks about Red Sox. You talk about Astros. You go about your merry way. Then you see each other again. You talk about that some more. Then some more, just about you comes out, and then it just goes from there. And I can't describe. Like, it's just one of those things where once you're in that place to be okay with that, because sometimes maybe you're not ready for it. Maybe right now you need to take some time to be alone and just kind of get through and get yourself back to a center.
I think the universe has played a very cruel trick on me right now, because I mean, I would say that at this point, I would say that I'm just friends with this person, because like I haven't known them that long. It's probably been like 3 months, maybe 3.5 months, but we have talked, and we've like spent time together. This person is very into baseball, is extremely knowledgeable. I would say I put them, besides myself, there's a handful of people I could say that I really actually value their opinion. This person has an extreme amount of knowledge about baseball. They are very into their fantasy baseball team. He's a very smart person. Because he and I have struggled, shared some of the stuff that we struggle with. So, I mean, he's a very kind person, loves baseball. I love baseball. So we have a lot in common. Unfortunately, this person is a Yankees fan.
I know that's a very unattractive trait to have, but it's not an absolute deal breaker.
Not a deal breaker, no. I still want to, see this person from time to time. Like I said, it's extremely, I'm still getting to know this person. So at this point, we're just friends, and it's not one way or the other. Yeah. We both established that we like each other.
It's just nice.
And it has been really nice. It was so weird because unintentionally siblings got brought up like the very first time we hung out in person. And it was maybe 10 days after my brother passed, because we had made plans. I think we had made contact before I left town to take care of everything. And we made plans to see each other, I think, when I got back. And I followed through with those plans because I figure if there's no harm, I have some time off work. I would just, get to know somebody.
I need to get something out, and I need to get out of here anyways.
Yeah. And so, the very first time we hung out, I was like, okay, I don't want to make you uncomfortable when I tell you this. I apologize. I said, I let him know that my brother had literally just passed away. And I apologized after. I was like, listen, I didn't mean to cross an emotional boundary for you or make you uncomfortable. I felt really bad because that's a heavy thing, a heavy energy to bring into somebody's personal space. I apologize. They're like, no, and from the whole time, they've been very nice, very kind about the whole thing, and very, I think that's the thing I value about them. One of the things I value about getting to know this person is they have been very kind, and they are, even though sometimes I may not understand their actions. There's always a point where we ultimately, in the end, there's been a few times where I've been like, what? But we've always communicated. And, this person is a little bit older than I am. It's he's in his mid 30s, and I am just newly 30. New to the 30-year-old club. But so I think that that's another thing, is that as you get older, it's really refreshing to not have to deal with some of the
what the 23-year-old Michelle problems. The 22, 23.
I was real stupid, and I was making some dumbass decisions and conducting myself. I did some questionable things. I probably did some unsavory things. I was a hot GD mess. And I just want to go ahead and apologize to everyone that I, hurt, like with my actions. It's just like it was a lack of maturity and understanding on my part. That's not excusing the behavior.
True.
So I do apologize to anybody that was deeply, that was really affected by the way I acted or things that I said or things that I did, because at this point, I am kind of ashamed of some of the stuff, like of the way I handled myself.
Yeah, absolutely. We all are. Welcome to being older. Welcome to this world. Because I was going to say that when people say they want to date someone in their 20s, I'm like, why? There are some mature people in their early 20s, and they're few and far between. But it's just not me. And you just learn to value different. There's so much better traits that you learn to, as you get older, be okay with, versus when you were in your 20s and superficial. And it's that, to me, is more of what I kind of, when you said that, when you're like, 30s and how different. I was like, and so when you said as an older person, it's like, when you finally get to your 30s and your life's going in direction, it's amazing how much different the people you gravitate towards.
I mean, I'll be honest, because we matched on an app. I'll be honest, like initially it was, he's a very attractive person. Like,
yeah, doesn't hurt to be that way either.
I wanna go ahead and I just wanna like advocate for shorter men. I think shorter men are fucking great. They are fantastic. And women are like, I only like 6 foot or taller. Girl, please. I'm 5'1", so somebody who is like 5'5" or 5'6", logistically, it makes things a little bit easier. I don't have to stand on my tiptoes. I don't feel like Thumbelina versus like a giant. So this person, but initially, like, yeah, because on those apps, there's always a superficial component to it. So yes, he caught my eye because he was aesthetically pleasing. And the very first time he and I hung out, the day before we hung out, he fractured his foot. So when he walked out of his apartment to greet me, I thought I couldn't see the rest of his leg. So I thought he only had 1.5 legs for like the first 2 minutes. And I was like, it didn't faze me because, he and I had talked. And so we shared.
Didn't faze me. That reaction you just had to missing half his foot does not say it didn't faze you. It fazed you, but you played it off.
It caught me off guard for sure, but it wasn't like something that I was just like, oh, it's not something that changed how I potentially could view this person. So, and that's like something he gives me a hard time about. It was, but yeah, it's been refreshing. It's nothing, like I said, we both do our own thing. He's also super into fitness, like I am. He takes it super seriously, takes nutrition really seriously. He's more like I don't, like I said, we're still getting to know each other. I know that he really is focused on like really into bodybuilding. I am into, I'm working my way towards a figure competition, because in the world of like health and fitness, you do a lot of there's Mr. Olympia, blah, blah, blah. But for females, there's, when you do like competitions, there are, I think in the standard fitness competition, there are three general categories for females. And within those categories, there are levels to it, but it's figure, bikini, and then it was bodybuilding, but they've renamed it to something else. So bikini is exactly as it sounds, like how you look in a bikini, like what it's the figure competition is what I'm more working towards. It has to do with like muscular, like muscle tone, muscle structure.
It's not how many muscles you have, just how your muscles look.
Exactly. And you know what? I'm not even ashamed. I know this sounds very vain, but I like that I'm ripped. I like that I have like a 6-pack. That's some shit that I value, because I work very hard for. And when it's superficial, as like the fitness thing is, there's a lot of hard work and discipline and consistency that goes into these physical results. Like there's things, I don't drink alcohol at all. I do it like maybe once or twice a year. 1 year, like once on my birthday. That's pretty much it. Maybe around New Year's, but 0 alcohol. I mean, I'll be honest, and I feel comfortable saying this on record, because in the state of New York, I am medically certified to have cannabis.
Okay.
So I'll smoke, every now and then, not as frequently as I used to in my early 20s, but well, kind of on the regular, especially given the circumstances. I don't eat certain foods. Like right now, I'm more of like I have to up my caloric intake because I am back in the gym. The gym's just reopened in New York, so I am back in the gym. I'm burning more calories, but I try to there's things that I just don't do because I know that just body composition wise, knowing and understanding about nutrition and fitness on a very fine level. Certain foods are going to be, your body's going to process those and store those as fat. Mm-hmm. And there's different types of fat. So there's, visceral fat, subcutaneous fat. There's just so many different components of it. You just have to, in order to get, it's math, in order for A and B to equal C, you have to do certain things. And so I don't, as far as vain as it sounds, like I don't mind it because I put in 6 days a week, 2.5 hours, sometimes more fitness. I focus that on fitness.
So then I would say to you, then that's not a superficial or vain thing to be proud of your abs if you're putting in that much work. Now, if you weren't putting in any work and you just had abs, then yeah, maybe that's superficial. But I don't think it's superficial to. That would be like a comic, like I don't want to be vain, but I just, release my Netflix special. There's a lot of work that goes into an achievement. So I don't feel like it's superficial. I feel like that's an achievement. Maybe it's not a, monetary or a status, but that's a physical achievement. That's something that takes a enormous amount of discipline because...
Yeah,
because I read an article way back in 2002 of how to get washboard abs, and it was literally, he's like, exercise and meal plan. Your meal plan, you can only have this many calories at these intervals of time. Like you can have brown rice, you have to have like a cup of brown rice, carrots, and you have to do aerobic exercise this many hours in a day. You have to do these kind of weight training. Like it was a lifestyle. It was not a just do these exercises and eventually it'll happen. It was, you've got to starve yourself and push your I guess aerobics and weights to your absolute maximum while eating the absolute minimum of food.
Very well. I mean, as like time goes on, because it's 18 years now, like down the road. It varies from person to person. So when people approach me, because like people approach me about that, there's different ways of achieving that. And I think with back to what you were saying, like any major accomplishment, there is a lot of hard work to go into it. So like I know that I have a learning disability, so it's really hard for me. Like academics do not come easy. So the fact that I've maintained a certain GPA, mm-hmm. And like I just finished up like the personal training certification through like a college online. And because it was through an established and accredited institution, you earn a GPA when you go through it. And I was invited to that coupled with my past academic history post, mm-hmm. Primary school, meaning like post high school and everything. Given my other academic history, I got invited to join, like they have those academic fraternities or mm-hmm. sororities or whatever the fuck. It's nothing like your typical Greek life stuff, but it's just like it's solely for academics. It's an honor society. Yeah. I took great pride in that because my GPA is, I think my cumulative GPA is a 3.82. And currently in school, it's a little bit lower because I've struggled with the course load given what's been going on. A series of unfortunate events, mm-hmm. if you will. It's a little bit lower now, but it was a lot of hard work, an extreme amount of hard mm-hmm. work, discipline, consistency. And I think if more people ask me how I get this, like the result that I have, my answer is it's more complicated than this, but the simple answer is discipline.
Mm-hmm. It's discipline. And I will say this as well, because it's amazing how much better you are at ADHD when it's something you're passionate about instead of something you're not and you just have to do. Mm-hmm. Also, now you're gearing your academics to something you're passionate about rather than I have to take this class because it's part of the curriculum. And so when you can do something you're passionate about, it's amazing how much easier the work is because you enjoy finding the little things that you enjoy, the fitness, the muscle to apply those techniques. And so, yeah, when you find something you enjoy, it makes life, I guess, easier in a way.
Even with like the baseball training, because like it's a very hard thing to do. And I'm just like, I didn't play it when I was younger. I'm just not like, I'm very new. I'm probably like 2 years into learning, like really learning how to play, because I want to be able to design extremely efficient programs that benefit the athlete. And in order to do that, it's just from my point of view, I want to know, like, I need to know how on a very like how the mechanics work, like how each mechanic, like what joint is involved, what muscle is involved, like what is engaged, how do I need to condition, like because how like a program that I'm going to design for a pitcher is different than a program that I'm going to design for just like a typical client.
Yeah,
because you have to be careful with how you do that. So with the baseball stuff, it is extremely hard. It's humiliating at first because hiring this coach, I mean, the other people that train with this coach, they're kids. They're like 14-year-old kids, really young people. And I'm this like 30-year-old not just learning to play. And the fact that like it is humiliating, and it's a very humbling experience to have this like 14-year-old just hit bombs and you try to catch them, and just but it's good. I enjoy even though it is that there's a bit of turmoil that you go through, the end result, the pride that you feel like when you improve your batting stance, you're able to consistently hit. And then when those hits start going further and further, when they go past the infield, oh my gosh, the first time they hit that and it went past the infield and somebody actually had to make movement in the outfield to catch it during practice, I was like, all right, I feel like Altuve. I feel like the MVP. It's very hard. Like it's because hitting a baseball, like as far as like professional sports go, each professional sport comes with its own set of challenges, but I feel like hitting a baseball and like that's one of the hardest things, because I mean, you're considered extremely successful if you hit 30% of the time or 33% of the time. Actually, I wanted to shout out a baseball charity. So there is a baseball charity called Adopt a Minor Leaguer, because the conditions and the financial conditions and like living, like basically everything about minor league ball is not very glamorous, especially when it's like the lower classes, like AA, low A ball. So Adopt a Minor Leaguer is a charity where you can sign up. So somebody who is not a player, they sign up to be a sponsor, and players can, sign up to be sponsored. And then you are matched with a minor leaguer. And of course, like there's rules and regulations around it. Like you do not, like if you are matched with a minor leaguer as a sponsor, you do not, I mean, anonymity is really important to them. So like there's somebody that I sponsor right now, and you don't, unless the player, says you can share my name, you share my information. It's complete. Yes, you have like their number. How it works is like you're matched with them, you get their number, they make contact, and typically how it works, they tell you to allot about $100 to $150 a month to financially provide for them. And a lot of that time, it's just in like grocery store gift cards, because that's a big need.
Yeah.
So that is a fantastic charity. I want to shout them out. And because, I mean, minor league ball players, they're not, sometimes you just got to help them.
Yeah, you got everybody. You can use a little help from time to time. So it's never wrong to help anybody, no matter what they're doing. Michelle, I appreciate you doing this. I thank you so much for doing this.
Before we conclude, I also wanted to repeat that shout out to the Fan Association. Follow them on Twitter, on Instagram. We also have an Instagram account. So the Fan Association, there's a lot of exciting things coming up from that organization. So give them a follow. Also give Stephen Leonardi a follow. He is our founder and leader. So fantastic human, fantastic baseball fan. Ryan, thank you so much for letting me do this. I feel very honored.
You honor's all mine. I appreciate you. It's good to see you again, and hopefully things will start to cool down and stuff, and you can travel and do all those other things.
Yes, I will. I'll actually be in town in Texas from the September 10th to the 17th.
Okay. Well, I'll be at Hyenas this weekend and next weekend. I'll be in Dallas this weekend and Fort Worth.
Oh my gosh, that's perfect because my mom lives in Dallas, fairly close to where Hyenas is at. So I'll pop in and come say hi.
Okay. Well, I'll see you then. So that was Michelle Neat. I just can't begin to even wrap my head around when something like this happens. I can't. I'm an only child, so I don't have a sibling that I share moments with that aren't with my parents. So I don't have those moments of playing together or talking or making plans with somebody. So I can't begin to understand what Michelle is feeling when that's no longer there. My dad is also going through something similar right now as my Aunt Marie passed away last night due to complications from COVID-19. I'm kind of in shock because we were just there right before Christmas celebrating the holidays with her and everything was fine. It's just so shocking that she's gone, that in a matter of a month she could go from having conversations and sharing moments together to no longer being alive. I don't know what to say to my dad because I don't know what I can say to console him. And it's just so shocking and sad. And to lose people, especially at a young age when there may be more potential that they have left untapped, is really, really heartbreaking. And I feel for all of you that have lost a sibling that you were close with and that you spent a lot of quality time together. It's just loss of a woman's just never something you can really describe or come to terms with because you'll always miss them. Please wear a mask is all I can say. It's just so sad and scary that you don't know what another person's reaction to this virus will be. And it could be the difference. I understand there's freedom of speech, but the right to live supersedes that, and survival is always paramount. So please wear a mask or social distance. Take time to make sure you're not. Take a test to make sure before you visit that you're not COVID positive. Because what if you're asymptomatic, but the ones you love the most are not? I thank you for listening. You can follow Michelle Neat at MichelleNeat1 on Twitter. It's at Michelle with 2 L's, so MICHELLE_Neat1. And her Instagram is GI'mNeat. GEE_I'm_NEAT. Also, check out her on Twitter as part of the Props Network at Props Network HQ. Also, check out the Props Network as a online betting and sports. If you're a big sports fan, there's the Sports Dude podcast, which is also worth a listen, as well as the Walk On podcast from the Props Network. So please check those out. Check out Michelle. If you want to follow me, I'm at Ryan Perio. This Thursday, I'll be headlining in Hyenas, Dallas. I'm not as excited now due to the loss of my aunt, so I'm trying to kind of process that as well as prepare. It's been a really, really sad week. While I'm not completely broken up, I don't know if that's just from just the shock of it all, just the suddenness, or if I'm just that balance that I can feel it, but I don't let it overcome me. I haven't mentioned it to a lot of people, mainly because I don't want a lot of outpouring for sympathy. I'd rather just remember the positives in her life and the positive impact she's made in mine as far as a hardworking, loving aunt that gave a lot for her family. And as the youngest of the family, it's just hard to believe she's no longer with us. And even harder is there's nothing really we can say goodbye to. I don't know what a funeral will be, if there will be one, if they'll let us even see her or make preparations. There's just so many questions that I just don't know if I should ask at this point, because my dad is just so overcome with grief, and I don't want to impact that further with more thoughts on what may be. Just tell your loved ones that you love them, because sometimes you don't know when the next time you'll get to speak to them. Thank you for listening. And now some credits and thank yous for the people that make this show possible. Thanks to Barry Whitewater, who does my graphics and design for my comedy as well as my podcast. You can follow him on Instagram at bwhiteh2o. Get it, Whitewater. Also, a big thank you to Gunnar Olsen for my music. You can follow him on Instagram at gunbuns. That's GUNBUNS. You can also check out his website at gunnarolsen.net. And you can check out his awesome EPs and some music he's got coming out. Real excited for him. If you want to follow me on social media, I am at Ryan Perio on all social media. It's RyanPerrio. If you want to follow the show, I highly recommend it. Instagram and Twitter is at Some Fear Fans. Facebook group is Some of All Fears. If you have questions for the show or feedback, email me at somefearfans@gmail.com. If you want to be a guest on the show, also email me at somefearfans@gmail.com. We can make that happen. Please keep leaving reviews on Apple Podcast or whatever podcast platform you listen to. I just appreciate seeing that people like what I'm putting out. So if you like what you hear, go ahead and leave a review. I appreciate all of you for listening. And next week, we'll have another guest with another fear. Thanks for listening to the Sum of All Fears.